this is like Miro, his whole Vorlesung, the lecture, will end with Peter Cook. It's good, hat wird von Thorsten. Okay, let's start.
Okay, so what? So the topic is energy, huh? So how to discuss? So for me, it's very interesting because I love working with concepts. So how to take any concept and start unfolding and playing with it, or trying to figure out how to tell stories around concepts. So I was very happy when Clemens said, okay, let's go with energy. Then I did a little bit of research, how to start playing and how to talk about it. So I call this small intro VIS VIVA, and we will come later to the why I call it in this way. And what I want to do is, in principle, to make a relationship between energy, matter, and information. These three things. So I'm interested in concepts and in coding and in information. And how is this related to the notion of energy? And I think there is a very fundamental relationship, which we will conclude with, which in principle is about the contemporary world. And it's also interesting to find a way, what would be, for instance, images that capture energy. Yeah, so how would you find images that try to capture energy? And for instance, I would say that this image is about energy. Yeah? So it's about creating a certain kind of balance between heavy objects with light objects. It's a kind of a dance. There is a theatricality in it. It's actually a fashion photo from, I think, it's not Chanel, but it's Dior. I think it's actually from Dior, from a fashion show from Dior from the beginning of the 20th century. So there is a kind of a balance. There is a kind of potential. There is energy in this photo. Usually, when we discuss energy, there is always a relationship to matter. And somehow, in a classical way, what people would say is, they would say that matter is the material substance that constitutes the observable universe, and together with energy forms the basis of all objective phenomena. So you kind of have energy and matter, and from this we create everything else. This is a kind of a basic story, 20th century story of energy. And then all the stories from these things that are coming out are stories which are related to how to save energy, how to transform energy, how to be energy efficient. You know, this kind of classic, today it's very popular. Right? If you're a student of architecture, everyone is talking just about sustainability and saving energy. And if you do architecture has to save energy, because then you are a good person and you have a good project. Yeah? What is interesting with this kind of setup is that it completely escapes the notion of energy in a sense of a spirit, in a sense of atmosphere, in a sense of love, in a sense of emotion. So this is something that this understanding of energy is completely blind to. Yeah, so it wants to give us a very specific understanding of what energy is. And I want to challenge this, for instance, with one interesting book, which was actually written by my PhD supervisor. And the basic story goes around this thing. So the classical narrative that we have today, why you have to be very careful with your houses when you design them, because we have a limited amount of energy on our planet. And if we spend it all, we are all going to die, or it's going to be like this or like that. So we should not spend all the energy. We have to be very careful with the energy, because this planet is like a small ball, and especially when you go, this is a photo from Apollo, so it's the first photo of Earth, it's the blue marble. And this object, we can exhaust it. This is the classical story that is being told to us. But now what happens if we make this thing a little bit smaller and bring another object into the game? And this is this object. Now we make it a little bit bigger. Now this object here is not anymore an object of finite energy, but actually it's an object with infinite amount of energy. Because if we look at the amount of energy that is coming every day to Earth, then this understanding of Earth as an object of finite resources is actually a wrong statement. So it doesn't work. So here we can, for instance, challenge these guys who are trying to tell a moralistic story around it. It goes even to the level of oil. So if we eat or spend all the oil, we can have bacteria, photosynthesis, and all of these things, and we can just create synthetic oil. So I find this story very nice, and it challenges the kind of understanding of that we have to save energy. No, we should spend all the energy. So we should spend the energy and do something fantastic with the energy if we can manage it. That's the challenge. How to manage this energy, not how to save it or not save it, but what do we do with it? If you are interested in this, here is the whole book related to this topic. It's called The Genius Planet, and it actually talks directly about this. So the planet is a fantastic planet. Let's play around and see what we can do with the infinite energy here. And there is directly a PDF on Xenoteca. And here, if you want, I give you, you can take a photo of this. This is a username and password for all of you to have access to a library with more than 1,500 books around topics of architecture, mathematics, philosophy, and so on.
Picture.
Take a picture. It's nice library. If you don't have it, or maybe Clemens can also send it to you.
He wants. Yeah, I can forward it, oder? Or have it.
Another way but now let's see how can we unfold the concept of energy. How can we start telling different stories? And here, this library will help us again. And in this library, we have a small search engine, which is called Ask Alice. And you can use this. This is completely open, and we can start asking questions. So, for instance, we can change a kind of a library. Here we take the Xenoteca library and we start asking, what is energy? So for instance, let's take this and then open more of these things, and we will just try to figure out what might energy be about. Instead of trying to find a kind of a proper definition of it, let's just kind of go around and check. For instance, energy is produced. Energy is impossible. Dark energy is a form of energy. Energy is slowly spent in metabolism. Energy is the world's fastest growing source. Wind energy is the world's fastest growing source of energy. Energy is the most obvious and oldest solar energy. This energy is converted to kinetic energy, equilibrium, energy and equilibrium. So these are all the topics that kind of we talk about today, mechanical work and energy. Energy is the primary vehicle for instruction. Here it gets kind of interesting. Solar energy is used. Look at this. Energy is information. Information is energy. How is energy information, and how is information energy? This is my concern. Energy and entropy. This again, energy and syntropy. Okay, so like this, we can get and start fantasizing around what energy might be about. We can also do it in a classical way by really looking at language. So we are now just looking at what language is giving us. And if we go to something like a thesaurus or an online dictionary, here's interesting that we have two tabs around energy. So one is the person's spirit, and the other one is the generated power. The generated power, this is the thing that we today actually discuss as energy, and this is something that we can measure. So we can give numbers to these things. And this is something that we actually don't have a clue how to talk about. This is what religion does, this is what spirituality does, and this is kind of all of this has been eaten by the notion of science. So this is what we talk about, and this is what we don't know how to talk about. But I think it will come back slowly. Another way would be to look at the etymology of the word energy. So where is it coming from? So it says a force of expression, from Latin and Greek, ENERGEIA and ENERGEIA, activity, action, operation. And then with Aristotle, it goes towards the sense of actuality, reality, and existence. If we don't know what this might be, there is this funny thing today that we can ask it as well. This is the ChatGPT. So let's ask ChatGPT, could you please elaborate on Aristotle's conception of energy? And then it says, of course, I agree with this. Aristotle's conception of energy is not directly comparable to our modern understanding of energy as a measurable physical quantity. But it gives us a different perspective. What is interesting with Aristotle's, that we have two things. We have ENERGEIA and we have ENTELECHEIA. So let's imagine this situation that we don't know actually what is energy, and we have another concept in our minds when we talk about this thing, and these things cannot be measured. So what would be the conceptions? What are the stories that flow around this energy? So he is making a distinction between something which is work. So this was something that they could relate to, work in a sense of working, and something which has the potential. So ENERGEIA would be something which is actualized work, and potential would be something which is not. These would be two concepts which are on different sides. Another concept would be ENTELECHEIA, which is a kind of trying to achieve a certain perfection. And to relate this, for instance, to a notion of a soul, I just want to show how this thing is complex in that times, because there was no clear conception of what's going on. Today, for us, it's very simple with energy. There is a certain measurement, and you can measure energy when it's transformed from one object to another one. So it says, for instance, the soul. So if we have the notion of the soul, and the soul would be related to the notion of ENERGEIA, it's an actualizing principle that brings body's potential for life into actuality, and guides living beings towards the complete realization of their nature. So it's a process towards something, and this something is what they call a telos. So this is what a tree wants to be. It's in the tree what it wants to become, and to become this, the process is ENTELECHEIA, which is a kind of way towards, and to achieve this process there is a certain conception of ENERGEIA, which is a kind of an actualizing process to get there. If we try to now to discuss this with the people of Homer's time and to see what they might say about it, let's just look at this a little bit. So when the winds have fallen, the sea is at rest and supplies less energy to the Nile in its descent. But the force of storm cannot for a moment be compared with the energy of the heavenly bodies. So you have the energy which is related kind of to natural forces, which is something that we kind of can feel together, and so on. But there is another moment here, which is the notion of gods. Many have wrong notion of the gods, for this is the nature and the ordinary consequence of bad customs. Yet all allow that there is a certain divine nature and energy. So there is a relationship between God's energy and nature, and this is something that we have in a way lost, And the beauty of it is that in principle, the Greek gods are in a way an impersonation of natural forces, but not exclusively. You have the winds, the gods of the wind, you have the gods of messaging, you have the gods of the sea, you have, like, for instance, Poseidon and so on. So the gods are somehow embodied in different natural processes, but not exclusively, which is, for instance, very different what happens to the inversion happens, for instance, in the Middle Ages when the gods completely take over. So if you look at the things which are happening in the Middle Ages, then it's always looked through the perspective of gods. Application of energy is the act of one in act, because energy implies actuality. So this is still related to a kind of an Aristotelian notion of what this might be. But with already with Augustine, these things get directly related to one God that is kind of responsible to all the creation and recreation regarding to energy. I think these pictures as well are in a way, I think it's a very kind of a Greek understanding of what energy would be about. Or for instance, this one, where you have it's really about the potential of things. There is a potential in the people who are building the city which is below them. So it's a kind of a play of different potentials. And for me, one of the most interesting articulations of energy is this vis viva. This is actually a concept from Leibniz. And what is interesting there is that this concept is at the verge where the God was still present, but the science was coming out. So what he was interesting is, how do we transfer energy from one object to another? So and he started to develop the principle of the conservation of energy. So how do we conserve energy? And there was this already, I think this was a kind of the beginning of the idea that there is maybe not the constant amount of energy in the universe, but there is a vis viva around us, which is kind of conserving. It's just transferring from one object to another. And then the story goes into another direction. The gods are getting out of the game. So these kind of energies which are implied in this picture cannot be seen anymore here. So what's coming here is that if this drop falls down, there is a certain physical process, and we are interested in this physical process and how it develops. So for me, this is a kind of a crucial thing. How can we understand today what energy might be about? I think we always have to look at how these guys were thinking, because it was a complicated setup then. And here we come to two interesting notions regarding energy. So first is with the laws of thermodynamics, and this is directly related to Leibniz, where he says energy cannot be created or destroyed, which means there is a finite amount of energy in the universe. That's an interesting concept. The other interesting concept, which for us will be extremely important, is the second law of thermodynamics, which says for a spontaneous process, the entropy of the universe always increases. So entropy is a measure of disorder in any system or in a universe. And this is a kind of one of the core physical concepts today. So these are the laws of thermodynamics, and if you know the laws of thermodynamics, you can make a simulation of this thing in a computer. If you don't follow these things cannot happen. And then the third one is not so interesting for us. But this one is so this is the measure of disorder in any system. Second thing which which is very interesting is our friend Einstein. And what Einstein found was a direct relationship between mass and energy. So what he said was that there is equivalence between these two, and this is the most famous Einstein's equation, E is mc squared. Yeah? And today we know that we can transfer mass to energy and we can transfer energy to mass. So these things are flowing in both directions. Yeah? So it's two facets of the same thing, how to think of the mass and how to think of energy, and they can go both ways. And today in high level, so it's principle is very simple for all of us to think how mass goes to energy, but it's a little bit difficult to think how it goes the other way. But they can actually do it in labs with stuff. So if they have some kind of beams, they can produce an electron or something like that. And now comes the twist. Yeah. And this was very funny, again, like working with ChatGPT, for instance. This is beautiful, huh? Give me 10 titles for this. So I'm interested in entropy, in thermodynamics, and information theory. And can you make it poetic, huh? And then this guy starts giving me different titles for what I want to talk about. And for me, this was the nicest one, yeah? The cosmic whispers, entropy in heat and information. But what's interesting here is, I know it's a little bit complicated, too many things, but this is the main point, huh? The main point is that in thinking, so what was the main problem? The main problem is this. So if we have things of physics, things of science, we can put numbers to them and we can do calculation on them, yeah? That's one thing. And then we have the other part of the world. This is so-called humanism. This is our language. This is what we talk. And we didn't know how to put numbers to our talking. Yeah, how can we do mathematics on talking? And look at ChatGPT. Obviously, we do it very, very well. Yeah? But this is the core of the problem. So, and this is the thing which for me is one of the most interesting discoveries of the 21st century. Huh? So how do we start computing talking? And in physics, the second law of thermodynamics says the entropy of a thing is always getting bigger. When this guy, a mathematical theory of communication by Claude Shannon, this is a kind of the founding paper on theory of information. What he figured out is that when you are sending a message, you can calculate how much information a message has. So if you send a message which has 20 letters A, it's a different amount of information than if you send the whole alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Yeah? And you can calculate. And how do you calculate the amount of information in a message? By looking at the level of disorder. And this is the same principle as in physics. So the main rule, how you transmit messages, actually follows the second law of thermodynamics in a different way. So it's the major concept in information is entropy, as is in a physical system. And this was something which was incredible to discover, that these things are actually related, yeah? And this is it, entropy in thermodynamics and information theory. So this is something, when we figured out actually that we can do calculation on language, yeah? And now we started to be very, very good at these things. So now we are on machine learning and artificial intelligence, and this is the founding thing around all of these things and playing with internet. So what is interesting here, just to give you two quotes and then I'm done. What, for instance, Wiener said, information is information, it's not matter and it's not energy. Yeah? That's interesting. But information must be carried by some physical process, some form of radiation. This is interesting. there is no information outside of the physical world. So information is always embedded on something physical. And then we can say, in a way, that information is not matter and it's not energy, but information is physical. And if information is physical, then an interesting consequence would be that everything in a way communicates. And if everything communicates, we could argue in a way that nature talks. For me, this is like, I don't know if you can enjoy this as much as I can enjoy, but for me, this relationship of having something in physics, which we were developing as humanity for a long time, and to be able to for me, this is in a way bringing the gods into the whole story, because now and if we look at it from this perspective, then for instance the planet Earth talks. It talks to us and it says, if you are not behaving well, I will raise my temperature for 1 degree, and if you still misbehave, I will raise it for another degree. And we now know how to listen to this and talk back.
Thank you. I was really doing more. Before I started this lecture series, I did the same research you did, and I was like you, also using Alice just to play with it, not in this deep way you did it, but I was really super crazy about how much I got when you typed in energy and it was about spirit or soul. Like I saw this like that matter is matter, but with energy it gets life, living matter. So living matter is then talking to you. Like there's the body, the clay body, and then the energy is giving to this clay body, and then life is there, and then you can start communicate with it. And then I also did this research of this one Google. I can't remember the name of the website, but where you enter some terms, and then Google looks for how often is this term used.
Engram,
yeah, and where it is used, and it was crazy how often energy was used before we started using it in the way we use it. It was huge, and then I think it dropped somehow, and then came back, and this was really interesting. I would like now, yeah. Here you see this peak. No, this wasn't what I saw. It's too late. Like, can go. Yeah, I think I moved back to. This was so crazy. Like with the super peak, it was crazy. Why? Yeah, and I really like these methods to try to understand like the world and where we are and how we should deal with information. Yeah. I had this. I looked into Da Vinci, for example, Thomas von Aquin, then Foucault. And this was really interesting how they used this term energy, and they used it in the same way. And now you were talking about much more interesting than the way we use it so far. And talking about energy consumption is actually a boring thing. It's really much more important to try to understand why objects talk to us, especially when we, as architects, design objects and environments. And you said, I think one really important thing, all objects talk constantly, always. They always communicate. And I think this is really true. And So, and we as designers design our world. We need to understand that these things we design, they talk. So it's super important that we be aware of that, because if you don't be aware of that, we can do shit and still talk shit then.
Yeah, and I mean, what's interesting today is that actually we have a mathematical proof that this is not. I really like this because it's not anymore. You know, all this. Always we have been thinking that everything talks. Yeah,
It's not new.
it's not new. Yeah,
That Roman was talking about it. You cannot not communicate, and he was talking about people, but it's also like objects cannot not communicate. Chair always communicates. Sit. It's this communication and this duality of the communication. There's the information, the matter. This is also not new. Yeah, but now it can like argue from a scientific point of view and not from a humanistic point of view.
yeah. It's not anymore something ethereal or whatever. Yeah, it's now we can actually do calculation on this thing. And but what I think is interesting when we say that objects and then that things talk, the thing is that they, like if you meet a new person, yeah, you have to figure out what do you want to talk about, how do you talk, and what is all of this about. Yeah, so you cannot. The object will talk back to you only if you ask an interesting question. And so you need to know what to ask and how to ask. And this is then I think the notion of encoding and so on. So you can ask this chair many different questions, and it will, depending on what you ask and how you ask, it's going to give you different answers. Yeah? And it goes towards the mountain, and it goes towards a plant, and it goes towards the universe. Yeah. So the universe is always sending some kind of messages, but how do you decode those messages and how do you make sense out of these messages? Or like when you meet a new person, it always takes a little bit of time to figure out on which frequency you will talk and what's the energy of this other person, how you will synchronize and so on. And it doesn't happen immediately. Yeah? I think that's a kind of a nice way to think, how do you encode this?
For me, it's important that we have the proof now that we can, like, from a mathematical point of view, prove that objects talk.
No.
It's not important. I mean,
it's not. But what is interesting is that we can have deeper discussions with objects through this. So once we can, so it's not important that we can prove it, but computation becomes almost a language to talk to objects. So from my perspective, machine learning and AI is a way how to talk to objects. And intelligence is not in this thing, but it's in the object actually. Yeah? And then we measure those objects in specific way, and now we know how to, or I think measure is actually not the right word. We talk to them, yeah, and then they are giving us certain information back.
They like, we develop now language to talk to objects.
Yeah,
like a way of communicating, so they can talk back.
They can talk back.
So how and things like now we can make out of energy matter, which wasn't there. We couldn't do it before. We first burned something and we got the energy, and now we can do it in the other way around. Now we can do it the other way around. So we can talk that.
And I think now the for instance, with this ChatGPT and so on, we figured out how we can talk to ourselves. So it's a kind of reflective moment. But I think the consequence of this will be that we will start actually talking to everything. So this is just a development of a certain type of language with machine learning, which now for the first time gained the planetary popularity. Now everyone knows what this thing is. And I think through this, because now we will really see that everything communicates, or we will have this perception of it.
You use ChatGPT? ChatGPT?
You don't use it. You have to use it immediately. Like, it's fantastic.
Yeah. I was playing with it. Told Arnie about my first trials. Yeah. I was just asking, like, more or less the same thing you did. I had this idea of discussing with ChatGPT about architecture and defining architecture more via feelings. I said, let's think about that architecture is not the object but more the feeling, because there are many objects, and some we think they are more architectural and some not. So I think actually more the relationship, not the object itself. It's like the kind of relationship I have, and it's more the feeling I have towards my environment. This is what I asked ChatGPT, and we got a really nice answer, a really nice this text. We said, okay, now please add some quotes. And they got really nice quotes, first from architects like Louis Kahn and Frank Lloyd Wright talked about that, and then now more towards philosophy, and I got nice quotes from philosophers. And then I asked, okay, now how does Leda Bullman think about that? And I got quotes from her. Then I asked, how does Miro Roman thinks about that? We got a quote from Miro. I said, come on, I'm not sure if you wrote this book. And I checked this book. You didn't write this book. It was a lie. This was just, and it was like, come on, that's not true. You lied. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not true. You cannot take it.
Yeah. This, but the way how you communicate with it is super nice. Yeah. And the first texts were beautiful. Yeah. So I think, again, it's a tool to use, but you need to learn how to use it. Like, you can't take it serious. You can't just take serious what you do with it. This is now mine. I don't know how you use it.
Well, for me, like, I really enjoyed like this kind of, can you find me a photograph that represents the concepts of ENERGEIA and ENTELECHEIA? Yeah? And then he gave me this. And I was like, man, this is fantastic. Huh? This is directly Greek conception of what energy is. Bam. Or for instance, VIS VIVA, and then I got this. And I was like, I got this for VIS VIVA, and then I got this as well. Yeah? So this for me is like, if you want to find this on your own, first you have to spend like 3-4 hours, yeah, to find these good images for these concepts. And with this, like, this kind of tricky stuff where you need to do relationships, or for instance, I was asking him questions directly. Can you give me the understanding of ENERGEIA and ENTELECHEIA, VIS VIVA, thermodynamics, and entropy in philosophy, in mathematics, in biology, in chemistry, in poetry, in literature, in architecture? I made 20 questions, and you're just giving, and you are reading through this, and you don't care if it's true or not. You're just getting a kind of a picture.
Yeah. For me, it was really the same thing. I was getting the picture, and then I started to like dig into like the quotes I got, and some were right, like real, and some not. But wasn't that important. It was like this. The discussion was interesting.
And you want to get kind of a flavor of where can it trigger you to push your thinking somewhere where it's not.
And then I did the same thing. I asked, now give me 10 bullet points. And so crazy. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then it has again this, I always say this, divine moment. It's like this has some, it's spiritual in a way. Not right, not wrong, but the feelings are great.
And you can push it to make relationship between things which are not obvious. And then you can tell him, okay, now do it 20 times, and you get a spectrum of things, and find this beautiful.
Right now I have to read about 100 little papers from the Raumgestalten, Grundlagen der Raumgestalten Vorlesung, Prüfung, about 3 pages each student, 400 students, and I would love that they would use ChatGPT because it's so ugly and crazy what I have to read. It's all this is it. Please use this tool. It's just I can't stand it anymore. But then I have to read it, and it's so much more fun to because what I think is important. It's still me asking the question and starting this discussion with ChatGPT, and it's still me then picking things and dig deeper and like use this as a creative tool. Yeah. For I think please use it.
Yeah, play around and you can do really fantastic stuff. Or like for instance now with Daniela for her diploma we are discussing, yeah, and now she's doing. She has a character, and this character is having a fashion show, and then there is a famous fashion designer who is writing a review in a newspaper, fictionally, yeah, and it's this Alexander McQueen, yeah. And then she invents a story, and I'm like, okay, you know what you should do? Go to internet, find interviews with Alexander McQueen, where he's really talking in his words, and then tell ChatGPT, can you please now rewrite this text by using Alexander McQueen's words, and here is a sample of his words. So you train the ChatGPT on a piece of text, and you tell him now do it in that style. You can do this kind of things. It's insane. You can tell him, write as Clemens would write, and here is a sample how Clemens write. Now copy and mimic this style. Good thing. Yeah, but it doesn't matter if it's good or not. Yeah? I can have your writing.
Then copy me.
I can copy you in a funny way. I find this fantastic.
So that like you could do when they do them the writing for this class, can first say, I wanted to do the writing like, I don't know, some stupid thing, like Platon did it. So you give some Platon writing, and then you start a discussion and use this, and this could be part of the concept. No. And you could first explain why Platon and why this topic, and then you start organizing text.
And then I think where it gets interesting is that you force Plato to talk about internet, for instance. Yeah?
Okay. Oh, by the way, I did again an image, and but I always said, where is it? Because I use DALI for each lecture, and I play with it and ask DALI, like, I type in like about Miro Roman some ideas. Please do me a picture for this lecture. I can show you now the results. Second, good, well prepared. So cute. This is LSAI, Alice, and a Greek word, an ancient word. It's I don't know why I typed in that word, but I think, yeah, it's obvious. And then I had this I also like. This is like a script on a Greek. I don't know why I always use for you this. I like this idea that you talk on the one hand about Platon on Greek concepts from the Greek conceptual AI, for example. Let's have somebody coding on the wall on a Greek old this app and now I want some old guy doing computing. And this is what I got. This is the computer. This is the computer for the Greek computer.
Yeah, I love this stuff. It's crazy, huh? And it's directly goes again in this direction of text. Now I think what's interesting with this DALI and Midjourney and this ChatGPT and so on, that the future of computing is going to be more and more text based. So funny, yeah, but kind of you just say what you want and it's coming out.
What do you think are the consequences to our work? Like, how are we going to change the way how we work?
I think so, a little bit, yeah. I think that what's going to be very interesting and very nice is that you can test projects in general very fast. So from the idea of kind of conception, branding, and then first outputs, this can be done super, super fast. And I think this is going into the direction of what architecture is about. It's about bringing things together. So all these small experts, you can kind of bypass them. It's going to be a world beyond experts. The ChatGPT and DALI, they are the experts. And we will have to bring things together. And then maybe when you want to render it to the physical world, you will again need to have experts which will be then even more specialized. I don't know, but I think this is the promise kind of going beyond experts.
But isn't this also like a scary boom for those who start to become now experts in architecture?
But I would say that architecture is not about, it's a generalist occupation, and that's why we are lost.
Yeah.
We at the moment architects are lost, so it will take us 100 years to come back because we are not specialists. But I think with this thing, the tide is going in our direction.
Because you don't need specialists anymore.
Yeah.